This story isn't trying to solve a mystery. It's trying to test the limits of human perception. It's not a traditional hero's journey, and it's not simply just about Apollo. At its core, The Changeling is a story about Emma. Her journey through womanhood, motherhood, and struggle to reclaim her own identity. The real question of this novel is not what is real. It's about whose reality matters, whose reality counts, whose reality is accepted, and whose reality is heard. The question I kept asking myself through this entire novel is, what is Emma's story? Hi, I am Sarah and welcome to CoreMoodz, and today I'll be talking to you about The Changeling by Victor LaValle. I recently reread the book and I watched the first season of the Apple TV show. I found myself analyzing parts of the book and trying to understand and having a lot of questions. So I just thought, let me just write down my thoughts and share them. I came to a conclusion and I'm gonna share about that later in the video. But first of all, what is The Changeling about? The Changeling is a 2017 book by the author Victor LaValle. The book blends horror, fantasy, and folklore elements with human themes like love and trauma and identity. The story mixes everyday reality with dark fairy tale and mythological elements, creating something both emotional and unsettling. The plot follows Apollo Kagawa, a rare book dealer living in New York City. Apollo falls in love and marries Emma, a very mysterious librarian with a troubled past. After the birth of their son, Brian, Emma starts to act very strangely and ultimately disappears after a grand, tragic, shocking act of violence. That's how Apollo starts his journey. Apollo's journey and search for answers pulls him into a hidden world filled with danger, folklore, and secrets that blur the line between reality and myth. The first question that I've asked myself is, what does the term changeling mean and what does it mean in this story? In European folklore, a changeling is a supernatural child or substitute that is left in place of a human infant after the child has been abducted by fairies or otherworldly beings. So this belief was spread throughout Europe since medieval times. A lot of the times it was used as a reason to explain a child's illness, a sudden death, or developmental differences, and even if the child's behavior starts to change. And I think it's a great title for this book. But I think the big difference is, and in how Victor LaValle tackled this idea, he brought it to modern times and he used it to talk about parenthood and identity and fear in a modern New York. Victor LaValle is an American author and he is known for blending genres, mostly literary fiction, horror, and speculative elements. His writing often explores themes like isolation, trauma, family, race, and the supernatural. So I have read The Ballad of Black Tom from him, which I loved. It's his take on a Lovecraftian cosmic horror short story, and I really loved his interpretation. And the other book that I read by him is The Devil in Silver. Also really loved it. Also very interesting. It's also getting an adaptation. I think it's called The Terror, The Devil in Silver. Victor LaValle's style is very emotional, but also has a lot of depth. When it comes to atmosphere and creeping me the hell out, he's really good at that. And he does it while keeping me intrigued, keeping me questioning, keeping me trying to understand. He talks about social topics that he's interested in and that he feels are relevant to the story. I really love this author and I'm gonna read more from him because I feel like his books offer something unique and thought-provoking. So at the start of The Changeling, we follow Apollo and we follow him and his wife Emma. They have a child, and without spoiling where the story goes, I think you can guess from the title of this book where this story at least starts, or you can imagine, or at least you can think that you can imagine. I don't think anyone could have predicted where the story goes and where it ends. In the story, we are presented with Apollo and Emma being new parents. When things go in an unexpected direction, the narrative expands outward into the city of New York. Well, into a fractured version of the city of New York. A version with layers, a version where there are haves and have-nots, people in the know and people who don't know. There's something paranoid about the way that this story makes you feel. In this story, New York is filled with hidden, uncanny spaces and folkloric logic carried by the people that live on the margins of society in this very old city. I think I really love the way that the city is portrayed in this story. How ominous and big and scary it can seem, but also very familiar. How it's shaped by history, but also by technology. I think the first theme of the book is parenthood, the anxiety, the isolation, the trials of tribulation when you are a new parent. Victor LaValle connects the emotional destabilization of parenthood with larger topics like race and social surveillance and inherited trauma, while mainly focusing on Apollo. We see the story through Apollo's eyes. We understand how Apollo feels, and we read how Apollo thinks and how he perceives situations and interactions. The book uses fairy tale and changeling mythology as a way to externalize psychological and social fears, specifically what happens when trust breaks inside of a family and how easily modern life, especially mediated through technology, can distort reality and perception. Early sections read like literary domestic fiction, then gradually shift into psychological horror, and then go full into speculative territory, even feeling feverish and hazy at times. I really like this tonal movement. It was very powerful and very immersive, even though the transitions were sometimes a little uneven, but I tried to link it to Apollo's mental state, about him asking questions about what is real and what is not, about him having to deal with grief, about him accepting the fact that myth has been gradually intruding into his life day by day. Victor LaValle's prose are very precise, readable, and emotionally engaged. He has like a very grounded way of writing. And that aspect, to me, made the later, very surreal parts even more unsettling. I think the strongest aspect of this book is how mundane and domestic everything is going in the beginning of the book, and then all of a sudden this grand act of violence disrupts everything. Some themes were a little more in the background, I feel. They were hinted and just implied. I really like that. It makes it more interactive and the reader has to think and ask questions and try to give meaning. I love it when an author trusts the readers and gives me as a reader freedom to interpret and fill in my own thoughts, my own biases, and my own expectations. The people that like The Changeling specifically like it because it's a dark, horrific fairy tale in a modern setting. They like Apollo's journey. They like the focus on Apollo's identity as a black man. And they also like the fact that it's focused on him exploring parenthood and making mistakes, but also dealing with his own relationship with his father and how that colors the way that he is expecting his relationship with his son is going to be like. I understand that those parts are really interesting and also are what draws people to this story. And some people walk away with these elements being the part of the book that they loved. But to me, I have a little bit of a different take. For me, the story of the Changeling is not centered and also not focused around Apollo's hero journey of trying to find his family after this huge, tragic, violent act and trying to find some peace or answers. To me, this story was all about Emma. Emma, who's destabilized as a mother, whose perception of reality becomes illegible to every interpretive system around her. I agree that Apollo functions as the narrative's apparent subject, but to me, Emma functions as its problem, a catalyst, the reason the story is going on. This story is fundamentally about how gender, race, folklore, mental health, discourse, culture, patriarchy, faith, and institutional power determines who is allowed to have credible perception of reality. The central conflict is not what happened, but who gets to have their version of reality being treated as real. When we specifically look at the narrative structure of the story deliberately misdirects us. When we look closer at Apollo, we notice that Apollo rationalizes, he doubts, he ignores, and then all of a sudden, after everything falls apart, he investigates, he interprets clues, he moves through spaces, providing narrative continuity. The structure resembles that of a detective story or a protagonist going on a quest, or even a hero on a journey. Apollo is not the one generating the crisis at the center of the story. He only responds to it. Emma, on the other hand, is at the center of the destabilization of the narrative. She marries Apollo. She gets pregnant. She gives birth. Pregnancy introduces bodily transformation. Childbirth, while traumatic to some people, can destabilize the identity's continuity. Also, Emma's postpartum experience alters perception and trust of herself. And I'm talking about Emma versus herself and also Emma versus her surrounding system. Mainly her fear produces like this friction in the system around her. So what I'm arguing is that Apollo is at the center of the narrative, but not at the center of the story. I think Emma is at the center, and I think that distinction really matters, because Apollo, he tries to organize events into meaning, while Emma, she destabilizes the possibility of a stable meaning itself. And I think that to me was more intriguing. I think that Emma's motherhood journey in this story is not framed as a stable transition from one form to the other, but as a breakdown in interpretive alignment between self and the world. Mainly because I think this story, the text doesn't show motherhood as hard or as something that is impossible, but it shows motherhood as this condition with very subjective perception. It's not that Emma loses herself. She loses her authority about interpretation. Her perceived hormonal state and tiredness become a reason to take her voice away. Her inner experience becomes increasingly reclassified by others, translated into pathology, or even reframed as emotional distortion. Meanwhile, when Apollo snaps, when he becomes unstable, it's not translated as him being not trustworthy anymore. He remains narratively legible and socially validated. The system understands why Apollo did what he did, what road should Apollo take next. So that's why I think, to me, motherhood in this story is something that the moment this identity is forced upon Emma, it like changes something about the way Emma is perceived in the story. The story encodes a system where identical emotional signals produce opposite interpretive outcomes depending on who expresses them. Also, if I go back to the Changeling myth or folklore, those kind of stories are not decorative. They're meant as warnings. They're meant as a way to give reason to something unreasonable. I think that the ambiguity when it comes to Emma's perception and her place in the story, and specifically her experience, a very important conflict in the text. There are a lot of ways to interpret her behavior and the change of the way she's acting and the fear that she's exhibiting. I'm just sad that no one in her surrounding circle, no one in her system, no one in her village was there to support, to understand, to just be there and to pick her side and listen to her. I think it was so sad to see how fast there was an interpretation, there was an explanation to why she's acting that she was acting, even though almost no one was listening to her. It's like the narrative moves on, leaving her behind. Another very interesting theme is race in this story, because Apollo is presented as this main character and his dad is white and his mom is black. He has fears about being a black father to his black son and what that means, what he has to teach his son, things that his father never taught him. Also, I think it's interesting that a European, mainly a white folklore story has been used as inspiration in this way, because you can also look at it as reshaping main black characters in spaces that historically exclude or marginalize black characters from universal myth structures. So then whiteness is not the default, and I feel like that affects the entire story. And I think when it comes to constraint, a lot of people talk about, Apollo is in prison and for a short time and he's very constrained, his freedom has been taken away because of Emma's actions. But I feel like constraint can be a lot of different things, because I feel like being black in the story is a constraint. Being a woman in the story is a constraint. Being a mother, being a victim. So I just feel like when it comes to intersectionality, Emma was on a losing side, especially because she's the one whose voice is not heard. When we look at her behavior, there's always an explanation. There's like the psychological explanation. There are family suspicions and cultural myth framings, and even technology is not on Emma's side and just holding her back. So after watching the 2023 Apple Plus TV adaptation, I can say that I really liked it. I love the interpretation. I love the longer shots. I feel like I think they captured the vibe of the city, the characters, the kind of places they would go to, how their house would look like, even their fashion. I feel like this adaptation was great. The acting was superb. I feel like the acting was really good. There's like this buzzing every episode, and also this glow and energy and heat that you can feel coming off of everyone. It's like coming off the screen. I really enjoyed this TV show. I think the adaptation did more justice when it came to Emma. It expanded the parts of the story that were hinted at and we knew a little about. I feel like there's more focus on Emma in the adaptation, but the POV is still Apollo. So I feel like that preserves the novel's hierarchy when it comes to narration. I I think to me, Emma is such a strong character because she has like this grand sense of identity. I think that womanhood was an identity that she was willing to let shape her life. But when it came to motherhood, I think she struggled. She struggled to understand, what does it mean? How can I be myself and also a mother? How can I be one, but also two people and then one person caring for another? So I think it's a little bit of a mindfuck. So I think she was a little bit in a very vulnerable state and she was trying to understand. And I think that's a very human thing. I think the horror of this story is that Emma experiences something horrific, something very tragic. And instead of her system coming around to help her, to support her, to figure things out with her, she is met with immediate doubt and destabilization. And she's immediately held to the standard of, oh, this is what a perfect mother should be doing. Why aren't you doing that? The tension and also the weight of expectations and of society's role for a mother. I think that comes really heavy on her. But I really like the journey that she goes on. Also, speaking about mothers, Apollo's mother in adaptation, she gets an entire episode and I really loved it. Such an interesting and surrealistic and artistic, creative episode. And they used, I think, one phone call conversation that she's having with Apollo in a very important moment and explored on it and made it an entire episode. And I just really love the creativity. I think Apollo's mother, her part in the story also tells us or shows us that womanhood is something that is passed on. The only people that will understand what you're going through as a mother are other mothers. So the importance of community and connection and having people and having a system, I feel that is reinforced. I really love how complex Emma is. She's not just a mother, a wife, a sister. She is Emma. And I really think that was her strength, that she was complicated and she was not easy to figure out. The transition of Emma being carefree and creative and a spirited person into dangerous and unpredictable and unstable was really tough to witness. I think it's very interesting. And it's not something I thought about the struggle of women that have had children to hold on to their identity and sense of self. I think to me, even if I look at the story just from Emma's point of view, the story is not about who's right and who's wrong. It's about the fact that her story cannot remain intact once it enters a system designed to explain it. I have a few quotes that I really love that I wanted to read to you. When you have to save the one you love, you will become someone else, something else. You will transform. People call us witches. Maybe what they're really saying is that we were women who did things that seemed impossible. The only magic is the things we'll do for the ones we love. I really love this book and I hope you're intrigued enough to pick it up. The TV show still has a second season to finish the story. So I'm really curious about how the story is going to continue in the TV show. Are you planning to read The Changeling? Did you already read it? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching and bye.